So today we continue our conversation around the psychic being, and we welcome Mona. Mona, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having accepted our invitation.
Thank you.
So my first question to you is, are you in contact with your psychic being? And if so, how does it manifest in your daily life?
Okay, that's a very difficult question. And I don't know if I will be able to answer it with full justice, because I feel every day I'm a different Mona. And when you asked me for the interview, it was a few days ago. And then today morning I woke up and I said, okay, let's see how I am today. So I think, yeah, for me, the most important thing is to live in the present. And that is my how do you say, endeavor. And I feel if I can really manage that, then I'm in contact with something else. But it's extremely difficult to be really in the present and not have anything fixed in your mind about expectations, preconceived notions, judgments, mainly towards myself more than the others, but also outside. And I feel this flow, if I manage, just to be in the present, for me, that's touching something deeper within me. I have a feeling, and after 30 years of living here, it's very difficult to compress everything, all your experiences in this short time. But I have a feeling that sometimes I have a feeling that we are very close to the divine. It's something very close to us. And because we have lost that connection, and I think as children we have it. And I still remember, even when I was 17, 18, I felt that, it was not very conscious, but it was there. Mm-hmm. And for me, it happened like when I fell in love, I kind of lost myself.
Okay.
And then, you kind of dissolve yourself into another person, because that is how I am and how I've been brought up or whatever. Then it took me many years to pull back those strings to myself. First of all, to recognize and to realize that there is something else inside me, which is Mona, which is not conditioned and by all these outer factors. So that process has been amazing for me. I feel like this is what and it's a never ending process. I don't think, unless we are extremely blessed and we can actually just, kind of get there and remain there. I feel remaining there is the most difficult thing. I think getting in touches with that through our life from time to time is very much possible. And I think we do have that grace sometimes, but to remain in that contact, that's the most difficult thing. And
okay.
Yeah.
So would you say that this contact with this true Mona is something that is present every day, but your challenge is to maintain this contact and to abide in this contact more and more?
Yes, absolutely. I think if we read Sri Aurobindo The Mother, we know that this is I think any guru in India will tell you that, or maybe outside as well, but that this Atma, this inside, that psychic being, because now we have this phrase of psychic being, which is very specifically defined by Sri Aurobindo The Mother. Mm-hmm. And that is also very interesting, because in India, the idea of soul is there, but the idea of the psychic being is not so, kind of present in the consciousness of the people. But we all know that somewhere within us is the divine, and we are all same there. There is no difference, there is no differentiation there. We are all part of that one. But to get there, after all our conditioning is removed, mm-hmm. that I think Auroville kind of hastens that process tremendously. Yeah. And this also takes a long time to recognize, because in the beginning you take a lot of time to kind of just the externalities have to settle down. You have to understand what you are, what is your swabhav, what is your swadharma, and all these things are very important. I think one of the reasons why I'm giving this interview is because I feel like I feel there is not enough dialogue in Auroville about this, and we all shy away. And I think this is very, very kind of present in our collective, mm-hmm. because somewhere Sri Aurobindo The Mother have said not to talk about your inner experiences, but it was in a context, and I also feel that there are times when you cannot talk because you're still in the process of evolving that inner experience. But I do feel that as a collective, if we don't do this, then this is a chance. Like, I really feel we are one of the few communities where it's very easy to talk about inner experiences, your inner progress, your inner way of looking at things. I feel this is one of the most precious gifts that Auroville has given, that anybody on the street, some of my most intense and most interesting conversations happen on the road. You just meet somebody or you go to Portus and you never it's an unexpected thing, and then suddenly what is inside comes out, and that person is also responding, and then you can have such a deep conversation. And I feel in Auroville it's much more easier to do that than outside. In Ahmedabad, for example, where I come from, or my relatives or my friends, I'm sure it's all possible, but it requires more time there. Here, everybody is working in that frequency, in that wavelength. And unfortunately, we are not making this as our basis of our collective living, because Auroville, it's natural, we're building a city. So we're growing something together. So we get lost in that externalities because we're all doing so many things. All 3,000 people trying to do, run so many schools and hospitals and buildings, and, so we get lost in that, but we don't keep our conversations. At least there should be a time when we kind of come together, ground ourselves. And I agree that I don't think this can be done in very large circles yet. You can do it in smaller circles.
So would you say that being in this present constantly, at least the more possible and the more frequently possible, allows this, let's say, random conversation and this random meeting to happen, and to find a way to connect to one another and to reach some kind of psychic field in Auroville where we could just connect from something different.
Yeah. But that requires that you have worked a lot on yourself and you know yourself better. I mean, knowing yourself is again a question, knowing yourself can take a whole lifetime. But if you've worked on yourself and you know what you are and how you can contribute to Auroville, what is the best part of you that you can give, I think then these conversations become more interesting, like, because people have to have these life experiences in order to, have these conversations. So, but it's nothing given, you can be, your life experience at this age, on that age, or this many years in Auroville can all be at different times. It's like a ladder that Sri Aurobindo has given us, and we can be all at different levels and still you can talk. It's not that we don't, but at least that inner search has to be very alive, I think, and that takes some time.
These conversations also allow people that are listeners or seers to come back to their own experience and to say, oh yeah, I relate to what she says.
And sometimes you can add. But one thing I've realized also is that these, like readings of Sri Aurobindo and Mother, like we have a small 3-4 of us are reading Savitri, for example. It's amazing what happens during those readings, because we are creating a vibration, an energy field.
Kind of field.
Absolutely. And in that, it's just amazing the kind of, realizations that you get, or I shouldn't say realization, but the kind of little drops of, and there you have to be very vigilant to listen to that. And that takes another time. Many times I realized that, I thought about this, but I didn't give it enough importance. I didn't externalize myself in that. So sometimes this is also important, like why we are having this talk is also, I feel, I've seen people, and I think I'm one of them, is then I internalize while I externalize. So that is one way of being. I don't think everybody can do that, but for me, it happens. Like while I'm discussing with you, I'm also internalizing at the same time things which I have inside myself, but they come out in a conversation because the right person is sitting in front of me, or the right question is there, or the right vibrational field is there, or the right action is there. There's so many ways, but then suddenly something pops up, which I say, oh, I see. Now I've given, how do you say, I've given a form to what was that inside me, a verbal form.
Okay, so to invite eventually people to recognize themselves in this process, was it something that came up in your life progressively, or was it constantly in your life from the beginning? I mean, this connection, this way to externalizing and internalizing.
No. It took me a long time.
It's a practice. So.
It's a practice. No, it's also knowing yourself better.
Oh, okay.
See, this is the thing. It took me so many years to realize, like I said, to get back to that Mona, and still I'm just discovering, and it's so exciting, and it's like an adventure. I never get tired. Like, it's amazing how much I can realize of myself. And there's always an internal conversation that's going on, but that conversation, when it has to stop, when it has to be active, when, what is it saying? Am I listening? Am I giving it a form or not? Like, am I acting from that conversation, or am I just, pushing it aside? All that happens inside, but that takes time to come to that point where you realize that there's this other Mona inside, and she's like this, like this, like that. So for me, as an example, it took me many years to understand that these 4 aspects of the mother. It's one thing I'm really interested in, and many things I'm interested in discovering. Like, Matra Mandir is for me really a key in Auroville of everything, of our planning, of our being, of our psychic being, everything. I just feel we don't explore it enough. At least I haven't done it enough. But I think 4 aspects of the mother, I might have read it a couple of times before, but it's only like a few years ago that I discovered, like, how to see myself within that. Like, you read all of this, and then you know that there are parts of you here, Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati. But now I can say, like, yeah, Mona is actually more Mahasaraswati and Mahalakshmi than Mahakali, for sure. Okay. And this is so exciting, because we can do, then remember we had that workshop where we did with the road and with the mobility. Yeah. But I love that, because I feel then you have to understand yourself, and then you have to see where are the places where you can make your strengths stronger, and your weaknesses, you can work on them. Because sometimes I need to be a Mahakali, or sometimes I need to be a Maheshwari. I should not shy of that, but at least the ones that are there, I must acknowledge and grow on that. That takes time, because you don't, sometimes it's not so evident. Yeah, so it's amazing, that journey.
Yeah. I can hear you. Yeah. So if we go back to your own experience, and in this whole span life, could you say that in the beginning you had some inner qualities that were already there, and then some skills were increasing as much as you were practicing or being, like, how could you say, distinguish this part which was already there and something that came up with your practice, with your daily life? And
I think this question of being already there is kind of, that's the only reason why we would land up here. Because I don't know what called me to Auroville. Like, yeah, something just happens, and then you feel like this is your place, and it's not even, for me, it wasn't so verbal. Like, it wasn't like love at first sight, like, this is my place. It's something that grew on me, but I knew that Ahmedabad is not my place. And I knew that I needed something more wider and more open, but it wasn't so verbal. It's not so conscious at that time. Yeah. Then, of course, once you come here, then it works on you. I mean, Auroville is a very tough place to live. We are very tough with each other. That's what I miss a lot in Auroville, that we are not grateful, and we're not a society that kind of, supports each other in a way that I would say we are used to in an Indian collective. Mm-hmm. So this is very different, we are international, so it's very different. But also this idea of, Auroville is a tough place, because you have to live with all these different ways of being, and then you discover yourself. So I think the process of living in Auroville has made me go within and discover myself. So it's just living. I think the day-to-day life here, if as much as you can try to be, sincere, and like I said, try to live in the present. And for me, as my nature is, I think it's easier because I'm very much a flowing person. I'm not a so my I have mind is of course there and it's very necessary, but I feel I'm most happier when I'm in the flow, and when I'm not in the flow, then I know everything is not working.
And there is a kind of callback
Yeah, to
to
go with,
remain in the flow
yeah.
again. So would you say that, I mean, this practice of being in the present is something which is increasing also? If we take the amount of time in a day that you are present to yourself, do you think that back to
Yeah.
yours, it's becoming more and more and more settled, no?
Yeah, definitely. I can say that's why I can be more joyful, more happier, more in the, if we are in the present, it's really so much more wonderful. Like I feel the sense of gratitude in me has really grown immensely. Like in spite of everything, the more blows you get in Auroville, actually the more you learn, and that is also very important. So I feel like in the last years, quite a few years, I feel I just wake up every morning and I'm like, wow, how grateful, to be living this privileged life. Like, not privileged just as human beings, but privileged to be in Auroville, but also privileged just to have, everything working. Like as a human being, we're so complex, and that I can, just live my life and everything is more or less, organized. I just feel like we have no reason not to be grateful for the life we lead. And I think that really helps me. It helps me to stay centered, whenever it's possible. There are always ups and downs.
So, what advice could you give to our listeners? I mean, because to be present to oneself is not necessarily something that we should mentalize. Okay, I should be present. It's something which is unfolding naturally, not to some extent. So,
Yeah.
if some people are more, let's say, entertained or diverted with all these tasks that are in their daily life, what kind of advice
Oh,
could
yo,
you?
no, no advice, Dan. I feel in our yoga, it's very difficult to give advice because I feel just everybody's so different and everybody is in such different space. Everybody's natures are different, their swabha, their swadharma. The only thing is, yeah, I don't know, take guidance from Sri Aurobindo Mother, and, see, and satsang is very important. I think at least I profited a lot from that, and also I think meeting all kinds of different people, being active and involved, for me that is important. Like, yeah.
But still, you have some practice in your daily life. I mean, you have something that you commit yourself to do regularly. It could be walking in the forest or
Yeah.
meditating or reading. Is it?
That's a good question. So I'm not a person who can follow one thing for, years together. I know people who can do that, and that's very good. But I realize that's not my way. So I do lots of. Auroville has given me so many opportunities to learn, to do therapies, to grow, to do my yogas in different kinds of ways, to do my meditation in different kinds of ways. Going to the chamber itself is just amazing. But every of this I do for a while, and then I change over to something else because then that seems to be the right thing at that moment to do.
Still
So
continuing to be in the flow,
yeah.
whatever happens.
I feel I have to do something. I have to do something. If I don't do for a few days anything, or when I'm traveling or there's some other thing, I really miss it. I really feel like now I got to get back. And it's not about just the physical. Physical, yes, of course, we have to keep our instrument good, and there's no question about that. And we're so lucky. I mean, you see all the people around us. I think Auroville is really like a youth that never ages.
This is in
People
the
are, yeah, people are amazed at what age people do everything, and that's really very inspiring for, as you're growing. But apart from that, I think my inner practice also, it keeps on shifting, like, what I'm doing. Like I told you, this reading is very important to me, but sometimes it just happens like going to the chamber. I just every evening I manage to go there.
So you manage to listen and to be present to
Yeah.
yourself quite, let's say, closely to allow, let's say, intuition or inspiration to flow and to follow. No?
Yeah, I think.
So we discussed
Yes,
a lot of beautiful and uplifting features on this process. But would you say that there are some traps in your life? I mean, threats that pulls you back to this humanity and
yeah, of course, lots of traps on the way. One of them is our ego, very big. And I'm just, fascinated when I see now. So this whole, last 2 years in Auroville, which have been quite difficult, and I've been observing and studying myself, first of all, how I'm reacting, and then how others are
how you
reacting.
were reacting to all these influences and
Absolutely,
these
yeah.
threats. And,
That showed me so much of myself.
oh,
And I realized like where I have to, my weakness, my strengths, what I'm doing. So definitely Auroville will give you lots of traps and ego. Like I said, I realized one thing I realized in this thing is that those who are very strong with the mind, it's very difficult, So these black and white personalities, with this is right, this is wrong. I'm absolutely not there, and I'm very lot of shades of gray, and it's just that's how I am. So for me also it was very difficult because the shades of gray to maintain to stay true to that it's not easy. But black and white in a sense is easy in that sense because you take a stand and you know where you stand. But then also it's difficult because you have to fight for what you think is right, so it's very tricky, this.
and it's also a positive aspect because would you say that the more we are living challenging times, the more we have opportunities to discover what we are?
Yes.
So, and it should, let's say, shift a little bit the, let's say, the aspect. Let's not give up and let's not avoid challenges because it's help us, no, to some extent.
No, there's no question of avoiding. I feel like if we have, this is where our faith is tested, and our sadhana is tested. Everything is tested now, and I think there's no other way. I mean, we have to take this challenge, go on, and if we have faith, we know, we always said that Auroville is a consecrated place. It is a place that is meant to be and is decreed.
And for the whole mankind also, not only as a
no,
little
not
bubble,
at
but
all.
for the whole world.
This is where it now becomes so evident that it's not just for us, and at least for me, because again, it depends on, I've heard so many times Auroville is like for the human mankind, and but unless you experience it, then it has no meaning. It has to be a lived experience. And sometimes you get a glimpse of this when you see what's happening in the world now, the Ukraine war, what's happening in Israel. And then it's very strange to say this, but you see resonances of that in Auroville.
Absolutely.
But I don't know if people outside of Auroville, it doesn't matter, but I feel like it's only people who are within Auroville and who have lived here long enough to understand that will be able to resonate with that.
And Auroville is still attracting a lot of people also.
It's bound to, but we have so many challenges, that's another thing. Like when you start, if you would just concentrate on the challenges, you'll get overwhelmed. You'll see it's impossible. It's an impossible dream, but that's Auroville. One thing you have to have is patience. And the other thing is faith, and faith is so important. And of course, there are many things you need. They have said, you need surrender and sincerity, and all of those
and
are
listening and observing and all this.
Yeah, so there's no end. I feel like this is just the beginning. I mean, every day I feel like I'm just beginning on this path, but so grateful to have this gurus, like to have found a guru is already a big thing in life. I know so many people in India who are very religious, but it's not necessary that they haven't that inner connection. So this is another thing which is very interesting. It's growing in India and in the world, this sense of the search of within, going within and searching. So we are at kind of like the forefront. And if we've managed
let's put our sight not necessarily constantly outside, but let's put outside
Yeah, but
inside.
it's always like that. But it's an inner and inside outside thing. It can't be just inside also,
Yeah,
because that's our work
right.
here. So that's what is so interesting. And making the city is given to us as a challenge. This, where in the world you have a place like this where we are actually growing a new city? I don't see, and with such a strong spiritual center, a strong aim, everything defined for us in that sense. I don't see anywhere anything like this happening at this scale with this internationality,
Yeah.
you know. So we are very extremely privileged.
Mona, in your understanding about the individual and the collective, also with regards to this multi, let's say, spectrum of Indian nationalities and also the foreigners, what would be your understanding of this individual contribution to the collective?
Things I realized in this conflict, and even generally being Indian, this is another thing, a gift that I've got from Auroville, is to recognize myself as an Indian, and then as a Gujarati, and then of course to transcend that. But first you have to recognize what you are, right? So it takes time. Like, it's only when I come here and I interact with other nationalities that I realize what's the difference, like who I'm an Indian, and what it means to me in terms of values and upbringing and thinking. And then within that Indianness, I discover, oh, I'm a Gujarati and I'm different, and why I have different things, and. So then I realized that also as Indians, we are brought up as a collective being. We belong to a set of first a family, a subset, then relatives, and then you actually belong to a certain how should I? Class is wrong because that will, but a certain kind of wavelength of thinking. Like if I'm Gujarati, or if I'm, then you go to the other subset, which is the Indian subset. There's a certain wavelength that connects us, and all of
Understand?
us are brought up to be a part of a collective. We are not brought up as an individual. Of course, we are individuals, but that is very important in our upbringing. And you come here to Auroville, and then it takes time before you realize that this is a mixed kind of society. And then you see that when you compare with the Western, because also I live with a Western person, but also generally my interactions with so many clients doing architecture now, and I see that there the whole society is based on the individual. You're brought up first as an individual, and then you kind of your that whole way of thinking is always centered around your being. And this I find very interesting in Auroville, because now we are trying to find this combination between the collective and the individual. Yeah. So the individual first people who are brought up in that kind of upbringing have to learn to become a collective. To become part of a collective is a very big yoga inside. In
And
order
it can
to
happen only from something which is common to all
yeah, it's
something
a
which is more interior.
interior. It has to be from within to without, but one has to recognize that first one is like that. And for Indians, it is very difficult to become an individual, and that's when I realized, because all this thing gave me this this privilege to discover. And then that's when I realized that when you become an individual, at least partially, to whatever extent is possible, then you can give to the collective the best of you. But that's what happens. In India, it's very easy for people to become a collective, like immediately. But you will be a part of a mass, and you will just be, that nebulous mass that is acting from certain social norms and values and all, which can be positive, negative, whatever it is. But we are part of that without recognizing it. But when you become more, because of Auroville's being process, internationality, the yoga, whatever, you become then that individual, then you can contribute to the collective in a manner which is the most effective and made for you, your role in the collective. Whereas for the Western mentality, for their upbringing, it is very easy to be that, but they don't know how to become a collective.
Okay.
That is a big process, And I think in the many years in the beginning, we went into that individual, because individual had to be strong in order to pioneer. In order to start a city like this, you needed another energy, right? Now our physical is established, and it's we are in another phase of Auroville's growth. So then you need this. That's why I think one of the reasons why this whole thing is happening, the conflict and all, because these two are kind of trying to find a balance, this how to become, and it's not a one day process. It takes a long time for each one to recognize this part in your being, which is conditioned by from where you come.
Yeah.
And then to remove that and then become this, for me it was a great understanding that came to me, that is what is happening. Because I used to look at Indians and say, wow, you know what, they have such collective spirit already there, so easy for them. But I realize it's not enough. You have to become more centered yourself and know your swabha, your swadharma, know which aspect you represent and what you're good at. Then you can contribute to the collective. And similarly, for the Western mind, it has to be the other process that has to take place. You may be very good, you're yourself. I'm not saying you're centered. You can be very self-centered or selfish, but that doesn't help the collective, because then you're only pushing your agenda, your thing. But then you have to learn to listen to others, to become a collective, to appreciate, not judge. This is so easy because the mind is very strong in that culture, in that climate. So
yeah, it brings another light to our conversation. So thank you, Mana.
okay,
Thank you
thank you
very
very
much.
much. Okay, right.